This is the Ramana Maharshi 40 Verses on Reality Satsang, a time to listen, reflect, and to deeply inquire into the self. Know yourself and be always free and at peace. Welcome. I'm Richard Clarke, hosting this satsang. I'm a seeker like you, sharing what we love. I've been blessed with years of deep practice and teaching, which I bring to this satsang. This week's reading from 40 Verses on Reality is verse 36. These are Ramana's words. Only if the thought, I am the body occurs, will the meditation, I am not this, I am that, help one to abide as that. Why should we forever be thinking, I am that? Is it necessary for man to go thinking, I am a man? Are not we always that? Inquiry is investigating your own being to see what is true and what is not. Inquiry is noticing your own existence, what is always there. There is never a moment when it is not. Why don't we notice it then? We are distracted by the mind. We think what we are is a body mind. What happens to our bodies and is then known by the mind, we think happens to us. But does it? Who knows this mind? Who knows this body? Who knows all this? We see this in our mind, and instead of knowing we are the consciousness that provides all the light by which the mind and everything else is seen, we think we are something that is an object of consciousness, something that is known. We think we are the body and mind. This is just an error, an illusion, an imagination that we superimpose over our true nature, over the self-effulgent consciousness that is illuminated by its own light, and that we are. What is true about your identity is always true. What comes and goes is not your identity. How can any of the changing things be who you are when you remain the same, even as everything else changes? The key to inquiry is this discrimination and negation. Discriminate the changeful from the unchanging, the real and the unreal, and then dismiss, get rid of everything that changes. This is everything that had a beginning and will have an end. This is everything that moves up and down, that increases and decreases. This is everything that has a cause. Dismiss all of that. None of it is you. None of it is who you are. One way to do this is with negation. This is where neti, not this, comes into play to extinguish wrong ideas and ignorance about yourself. Use of negation, though, should be limited to elimination from your consideration anything which you are not. Using affirmation, saying, I am not this, I am that, accomplishes nothing, since you are already and always that. You cannot make the real more real. Rather, just be what you are. You are already it. You must know this at the same depth that you know that you exist. Knowledge beyond the senses and the mind. Now, some notes on practice to experience this within yourself. Negation must be done thoroughly to be effective. Just saying or thinking netty, not this, is not enough. You must look deeply within yourself and find the different forms that your misidentification has taken. For example, if you try to discriminate to know the unreality of the body without similar discrimination on the seeming actor who seems to act through the body, you haven't finished your work. Be thorough in your inquiry. You have previously many thoughts and actions. You have practiced many years and reinforced these erroneous ideas. It takes time and effort to remove them. The payoff, though, is freedom. You have been bound with your own rope. So loose the knots. Free yourself from ideas of what you are not, and then who you are shines, revealed, uncovered. Now, to our videos for this week. First is from Swami Adyasakti, and here he is, and he'll be talking also about verse 36.
Namaste, and welcome to the 36th episode of Ulladu-Narpadu. So today, and the next few verses, we're going to wrap this up. And Bhagwan is making some really salient points that apply to almost everybody in the Advaita scene. Let's read the verse. If in delusion we think that we are the body, then thinking, no, we are not this body, we are that, the reality, will be a good aid for reminding and encouraging us to abide as that. However, since in truth we ever abide as that, why think always, I am that? Does one always think, I am a man? That is, to be a man, does a man always need to meditate? I am a man, I am a man. I am what I am. And what I am is a man. But I am also that. Now, how does that vibe or how does that mood square with the typical practice or the typical understanding of people who are into spiritual life or Advaita? Well, unfortunately, most of them are on the mental platform. And so they think that simply repeating, I am that, is the same as being that. But they don't get it. And the reason they don't get it is that, again, they are mistaking the symbols for the reality. I remember one time I was at a national rainbow gathering in the US, way up in the mountains in Colorado. And oh, by the way, if you've never been to one of these, you really should check it out. It's major fun. But one night there was a big drum circle, and everybody started chanting, "We are all one with the infinite sun, forever and ever and ever." And I was going, Actually, as soon as you say, I am that, it means you're not that. It means there's a difference between you and that. Try to understand. In real oneness, if there is even the perception of who I am or what I am, it is just a feeling. It's not something that you could verbalize. It's not something that you could make into a slogan or into a mantra. It's not something that you want to sing in a fireside chant. See, that's why 7 years ago, I made the determination that I'm not going to go anymore on faith. I'm not going to base my beliefs or my practices or my understanding on what somebody said, some authority. Instead, I'm going to look inside myself and be ruthlessly honest and see, what am I experiencing? What is my actual perception? Not just a thought, not something I read in a book, not something that some authority said, because that will just lead you astray. If you look at these religious groups, if you look at these spiritual societies, they always have a leader, a role model, a guru, somebody who says what to think, what to feel, what to do. And the legitimacy of the followers is derived from the authority of the founder. Not from their own experience, but by how closely they follow the rules. Now, there's a thing about rule followers. They never do anything original. They always just follow in the footsteps of those who have gone before. There's a certain value to that. Absolutely. But there comes a point where one has to go off on one's own and discover the truth for oneself. Otherwise, he never arrives. He never makes it. In the past, I was always in trouble in these different religious groups, because I already had the tendency to go off and discover things on my own. Although, for legitimacy, for the sake of credibility and membership in the organization, I would have to follow the leader. At least to some degree, right? But toward the end, it got really outrageous, because we were dealing with Raganuga Bhakti, spontaneous love. Now, spontaneous and rules never meet. If you're following authority, you're not going to do anything spontaneous. How can you? But their idea of spontaneous was to apply rules even to your emotional life, which is ridiculous. So, of course, I got into conflict with these guys. And I was doing some really good, if I say so myself, I was doing some really good creative work. But could I get credit for it? Could I get recognition for it? No. Why? Because I wasn't following the rules. I had experimented with things that were outside the purview of their philosophical rules, especially Tantra. I experimented with Tantra and I had quite a reputation because of that. Big deal. I did some workshops for 2 or 3 years and then I dropped it. Why? Because if you go into Tantra, if you go into sexuality all the way to the end, what you will find is love of God. See, so the real breakthroughs, the real innovations, the real creative work in any field, but especially in spirituality, is only going to come from those who break the rules. I mean, okay, now we're following Ramana, or we're in the sphere or the circle of Ramana. So let's look at Ramana for his example. He never followed any sadhana. He never read any books. He never went to any teacher. But he got enlightenment experientially at the age of 16 by intuition, by following his own awareness. So how is this? How is it? Well, I maintain that anybody could do this. Not everybody does, because they are stopped by this conditioning of following the rules, of being like everybody else, following the leader and so on. But everybody could, theoretically. Now, what does it have to do with this verse? Well, people on the mental platform, people who are following rules, people who are just chanting verbal formula to themselves. I am that, I am that, I am that. They never get self-realization. Why? Because to get self-realization, one has to actually be that. Now, of course, we're all always, ever that. But as soon as we say, I am that, and we're not. Because the statement, I am that, contains the assumption that I am not that. I am different from that. You see? It's paradoxical. It's an oxymoron to say, I am that. No, I am I. I am always I. I am never anything but I. I am. I. So, how does one attain this realization? Not by following rules. Not by listening to authorities. Not by doing whatever everybody else is doing. But by making a radical decision that I am that. It's simply an assumption, just like I am not that is an assumption. See, it's a background decision that we make, and then everything else that we do and say comes off of that. Well, I am not that, so I am not enlightened, so I have to do some sadhana, so that means I can never attain it. And people like that don't attain. The people who attain are the rule breakers, the creative ones, the experimentalists, the experientialists, the people who dare to go beyond what they've been told. It's just like leadership. Do you think anybody is going to come up to you and ask you to be a leader? No, it doesn't work that way. And if it does, then you're not really a leader. you're just a big follower. So actual leadership, actual authority is never given. It's always taken. So that's the way the world works, people. Real self-realization is never given. The guru is never going to give you something that you already have. The real guru is going to take away from you what you are not. So by negative logic, by negative statements, you are not this, you're not that, you're not this other thing, you're not these 5 koshas, you're not this mind, you're not this ego, so on, until there's nothing left. All you can be is you. All you can be is the self. So it is an act of bravery, an act of courage, an act of rebellion against all rules, against all authority, against following and against imitation, to take enlightenment, to take self-realization. Say, I am that. I am. I. That's the only way that anybody is going to make it. So, in other words, we're not always sitting here thinking, I'm this, I'm that. Well, maybe some very narcissistic people are. There was someone was doing research on L. Ron Hubbard and found out that in his early works, before he stole and plagiarized Scientology, he had used affirmations. And so he was going around all day saying to himself, I am great, I am intelligent, I am powerful. People want to do what I tell them to just because of my presence, and so on and so on and so on. So this guy, who is notoriously insecure and fanatical, well, let's call him a misleader, not a leader, but a misleader, because he was giving people things, he was putting things out that he claimed to be original, but were actually originated by others. So, see, actually, he's a follower. He's not a leader. Okay? I admit to being a follower of Ramana, but I'm also original. I also dare to create my own reality. And I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to talk about what it is because it's none of your business. But the devotee, one who actually loves God, will always be original, will always be outside the box, will always be unique and inventive and creative, and not simply a follower. Om Tat Sat. Om Hari Om.
And now we will listen to my teacher, Nome, with a Satsang discourse, Identity.
What we are, the self, is absolute being. Being is consciousness, and being is bliss. Its nature is truth, its nature is knowledge, and it is infinite. It is one, only, invariable, and it is that which alone is. Ignorance which has no existence apart from the self, for the self is only one, appears to cast a veil over that single, truthful self. When there is the veil, there is the projection of the unreal, which is characterized by multiplicity. To remove the delusion and thereby eliminate all duality, and thus abide in the fullness and perfection of the bliss of the self, Sri Bhagavan has given the instruction to inquire, who am I? Why, who am I? Because what you regard as your identity is of paramount importance. Although the inquiry, who am I, can be used in one sense for a variety of goals, such as the submergence or removal of thought, or withdrawal of the senses from their objects, and such. It is of paramount importance, the inquiry, because it deals with your identity. What we regard as our identity goes into the makeup entirely of how we regard anything, even the view that there is anything to be regarded. The identity is the key. And the inquiry, who am I, is the introspective search to know your identity as it is. It is non-objective by way of method, because your identity, the truth of the self, is non-objective. What you are can never be a known object, nor can it be an unknown object. You cannot be an object, whether that object be gross or subtle, something sensed or something conceived. When you inquire, therefore, to know the self, you must actually inquire to know the self and not be preoccupied with other non-existent things. Plunge inward to know what your actual being is. The negation as not this, as stated in the Upanishads, is also for the purpose of revealing what your actual existence or identity is. Loosely we speak of becoming that by virtue of such inquiry meditation. But really, this is not a becoming of anything. It is the realization through knowledge of that which is unborn, ever attained, and when known with its own innate knowledge, ever revealed. It is the clarification of one's own identity, which is the essence of knowledge, that is the real fruit of any spiritual practice. And it is that to which self-knowledge, or the path of inquiry, well, it deals with that exclusively. Let us consider the case of devotion. What happens? First, the identity in relation to objects is dissolved. The attachment to things is dissolved. Then is lost or surrendered the fruits of one's actions to the degree they pertain to oneself. And then in such devotion, the idea of being the performer of action is lost. Clearly you can see the dissolution of the false identity in this. Then the very idea of the life of the body, the senses, and being the enjoyer or maneuverer of the senses is dissolved. It is relinquished. Then being the mind and the buddhi which decides, or intellect which decides where the mind moves, is surrendered. At last and finally, the very individual notion of existing distinct from God in any way is abandoned. You see it as the same dissolution of identity, of false identity. When we inquire, who am I? We go directly into what is our identity and relinquishing what is not our identity. This is called the discrimination between the self and the not self. If you consider whatever it is you regard as an obstruction or some kind of obstacle or a chasm or barrier between you and self-realization, if you consider that deeply, you will see it as not so much the thing, the thought, the pattern of thought that seems to be between you and the truth, but rather the identity, however formed, by whatever qualities characterized, of the you that is apart from the self that has this wall or obstruction. Do you see what's being pointed out? To remove the wall or obstruction or to hop over it, you have only to inquire as to who it is, what makes up the identity of the one who's apparently bound, separated, divided from the truth. The realization of truth is non-dual. How can it be non-dual in your experience unless there is the utter elimination of the assumption, the false supposition of existing as an individual entity? Unless there is, as the Maharshi points out in Saddarshanam, that elimination of that I, how will the truth be known? The truth alone can know the truth. Consciousness alone can realize consciousness. Another cannot do so. In non-dual truth, that which is realized and the realizer are identical. This means they are one and the same thing, not two things of equal quality. As long as the individual is taken to be real, how can there be this realization? If an inquiry is made as to who is this that is styled as I, how could there be a state of non-realization? There are never two I's. Instruction along lines of a higher self and a lower self, a self and the supreme self, an ego self and the true self, are for purposes of aiding the aspirant for realization, not a statement of concrete fact. What is true is that the existence or real being of the self is always one and can never be divided. Duality, even so slight as the idea of I and that, is merely made of illusion. It's just delusion. It's imagination. The cessation of such imagination is knowledge. So determine your identity, and you will find yourself bodiless, without a mind, without senses, without prana, without beginning, without end, without anything or any quality whatsoever. But perfectly full as ever unchanging existence.
And now we will meditate, inquire for a few minutes. Breathe in and breathe out. Long, slow breaths. And notice that you exist. You exist, and you know that you exist. And now investigate within yourself. Are you a body? You know the body. Does the body know you? The body changes. Do you change? Are you the experiencer of the body, or are you the one who knows the experience? The body seems to disappear in deep sleep. Do you disappear? Does the self possess a body? Do you exist even when you don't notice? Even when there are no sensations? Even when there are no thoughts? Do you exist? Who am I? All right. And let us close with a short chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om, peace, peace, peace. Thank you for letting me share this teaching with you. This series on Ramana's 40 verses on reality will continue in the following weeks. If this satsang was of interest to you, I have more: a Ramana podcast series, a free book site, a YouTube site, and my blog. The URLs will be on screen next. Namaste.